Everyone who's awesome, not awesome, or anywhere in between. My name is Day 9, and I couldn't be happier to tell you that it is Thursday, September 1st, 2011. I have not paid rent. And this is Day 9 Daily number 343. That's always a bad decision to do because my house manager, to whom I pay rent, watches the daily. So of course I'm like, oh no, I just had a busy day, I'm really sorry. And he's like, alright, fine. He gets his Cheerios and he sits down, he starts watching the daily, num num num. First thing out the gate is my unbelievable irresponsibility. But whatever. It is the day before. Many of you know that for some weird reason my internet has been really wonky. I've been unable to do dailies. It makes me want to cry and shit. However, I'm just doing a daily. I don't care. I can see the numbers right now. It should be really, really laggy for anyone watching. The recording is going to be great, assuming my computer doesn't overheat because I'm doing an yes, it is. Yeah, go computer. Yeah. So it should be fine for the viewers at home on the archive. For the viewers live, I'm really, really sorry. Expect lag. Expect more lag. It should be horrific throughout, but I don't give a fuck. I love doing dailies, and I've been wanting to do the dailies for so long because it's my chance to delve into games, to study them, to look at them, to admire cool play, and to fantasize about myself doing it too. And I haven't had the chance to fantasize for nearly 2 weeks. So allow me to re-condense all that together. Today is the last daily. I will be on vacation until September 12th, where we will kick things off with Fun Day Monday, of the same topic that I was going to do this week, but couldn't. So that will be September 12th, will be the next daily after this 344. For today, while it is lagging, and because I told all my mods the daily was canceled, and then at 6:45 decided, fuck it, let's do a daily, they're all gone. So if the people in chat would please be so kind as to do a little modding help for me. If anyone says the video's really lagging, if you could just kindly let them know, yes, expect lag. Day 9's doing a daily anyways, and he is well aware of it. That would be great. Don't berate people. Leave that to, you know, any of the mods who are running around chasing people who are, like, flipping out. Fix the lag! Fix the lag! And then the mods will come and slit some throats. But if you could just let them know kindly, that would be good. Now I want to jump into a game between Complexities and White-rA from the team that everyone will always root for. It's a game that was played on Tal'Darim Altar, where I really like what we saw Dr. Duckload do, and if I had to sort of encapsulate, or not encapsulate, what's with me using my SAT buzzwords? If I had to sum up a big problem that I feel is a lot of protosses are having, it's the difficulty of getting a fast third base. The difficulty of getting a fast third base. Because, you know, say for instance, Zergs, they just build a third base, right? They just build it. It's not a big deal. Terrans, what I think I've seen in all matchups, are comfortable being on 3 barracks and starting their third command center. So though they might not have the command center at the third immediately, they will build it, and then when it finishes they can lift and move it, and it's very, very quick. Protoss, it just sucks because you have to start the Nexus right there, you have to defend it while it's building, and you're getting no advantage for it, but you just need it, right? You really, really need it desperately. But you just can't really seem to get it. So at this game, though, we get to see Dr. Duckload do something very, very cool. Very cool. So now we have El Doctor Duckload spawning here at the right or bottom right position. We have El Doctor Catz spawning at the top left position. And I just have a fast question for any of you who are helping me do the live testing of my lag. If it is not lagging, please type the word foot. So that way I both know whether or not you have lag and how far behind in the video buffer you are. Because if you're like 3 minutes behind and I start seeing foot and all that sort of stuff, then I'll know that technically, yeah, it's not choppy for you, but it certainly is far behind. Oh, Reason8 gives me a foot. Thank you, Reason. You're making me happy. Let's go ahead and speed up past this garbage stuff that's been going on for quite some time. Early Forge, and we also see Complexity's Catz going for the hatch first. This game, I would always like to say, is one of the all-time clearest reasons why early expanding is scary to do as a Zerg, and why many Zergs really don't. Because at any point in time, you can get cannon rushed. And now Goofy opening. He's going to transition into something that gives me amazing amounts of delight, but that's fine. For now, he's going to do something that makes me giggle and feel a little bit more at peace with my inner newbie. I want a cannon rush. Cannon rushing is awesome. Anytime you cannon rush, make sure that there are as few surfaces as possible. So, for instance, building a cannon here and then a cannon down here is bad. You want your cannons touching, because notice how this bottom cannon, its upper surface cannot be hit by probes, and vice versa. And we're seeing Complexity's Catz have to pull a million badrillion drones off. Is this worth it or not worth it? I don't really care that much. This is a phase in gameplay that I don't want you to over-obsess about. What I always do whenever something wonky happens is I try to restate it in an equivalence. I don't want to say, if I get cannon, or if I cannon rush and I has 8 drones off mining, then I can think, then I know what to do in this situation. Or even more broadly, people will say, if my opponent pulls drones off to defend a rush, then I'm in a new situation. What I want to instead look at in this situation is say something, well, this is kind of weird. I'm not always going to cannon rush him. For instance, if the Zerg was in the last position I scouted, then I might not be cannon rushing him, but I can still state this is a Zerg with a delayed Zergling speed. That's an equivalence. Whether he goes pool, hatch, and I don't cannon rush, or if he goes hatch, pool, and I cannon rush, in both of those situations there is an equivalence. There is something equivalent going on, the lack of Zergling speed. Something like that. That's a statement I want to make. Now, I'll come back to that later. That might not feel significant, but let me talk a little bit about the thought process that you would go through after this sort of, after seeing this kind of game. So let me note that Catz does kind of a smart thing. If my opponent is delayed on his gateway, I can build a hatch in his base, and it's quite effective. This is not that bad. This is actually kind of legitimately solid and strong. And it's important that you understand how to deal with it. This is the ideal way. A pylon and a cannon. This is ideal. I cannot emphasize that enough. If you pull a lot of probes off and try to kill it, you actually lose. As someone who's experimented around with a lot of hatch in main plays, and actually my friend Tristan, his brother, 4K Lost, does this all the time, and actually shared some replays with Tristan, that Tristan, of course, totally shared with me, because we're total little information sluts like that. I'm so happy to be doing it daily. I'm just delighted. Yeah. Did my internet just completely cut out? That scared me. This scared me. Let me just go to Google. I was like, I'm so happy to be doing it daily, and my bitrate said 0, which is kind of an unusual bitrate. Hey, Google works! I don't give a shit, we're watching a daily. Anyways, so 4K Lost does hatch in main versus a lot of protoss, and does it against really good protosses in deciding tournament situations, like when he's tied 1-1 with someone in MLG, he'll hatch in main. And this generally is one of the best responses to do it. If you pull too many probes, it actually messes a lot up. So, thus far, what I want you to glean from the daily is that cannon rushes can outright kill early expands, and that's why a lot of people steer clear from them. The second lesson I want you to glean thus far is that if someone hatches in main, chrono boost probes, don't bring probes to kill off this one hatch, because if he cancels it, notice how the photon cannon kills off the drone, and there's not another hatchery building in your base. So, we see that cancel there. And, of course, we see the Zealot now poking out. Now, here is the moment of equivalency that I want you to notice. White-rA did something that just blew my mind in half. He straight away went for this base. He straight away started sending units out here. Why can Duckload-Ra do this? Well, because if my opponent delayed his gas, and as a result has a delayed speed, or hell, even delayed roaches, this is... you can't really do anything about this. You can make a ton of slowlings. You can make a lot of slowlings, but you know, this is still going to end up being, on average, easy to pull off. And notice that we're seeing a lot right at the start. We see two geysers at the main. As we poke around, we see that really no tech has come out at all yet. There is a stalker being produced. It's all units going directly for this third base. Now, what I want to note is something I brought up at the start of the daily. It's kind of hard for protosses to get a third base. And one of the most important things to start to notice is that there are weird staggerings of how you get third bases that it's important to begin thinking about. So let me take an some staggering that people that's very easy for people to wrap their head around. If I am trying to early expand, right? Let me actually just pull back to this 1 minute mark right here, or the 2 minute mark, whatever you want, StarCraft, whatever you want, right? Here's an equivalence that a lot of protosses find themselves in. Damn it, a staggering that protosses find themselves in. If I build Pylon first, if I get to his base and I see that he is not going to be getting any Zerglings to me early, I can build a Nexus and then build my Forge. If I do see Zerglings out, I got to build my Forge and then build my Nexus. The most obvious thing in the world, right? That's a clear thing. The way people think about that is, well, I want to get my expansion up as fast as possible. I might have to get some cannons up to defend it, but most of the time I can just build the Nexus first. That's how protosses are going to state it. As we zoom up to this moment in gameplay, up to the 6 minute mark, I believe, or no, I guess it is the 8 minute mark. Come on, computer. We see this sort of thing happening, where Protoss is going for a ridiculously fast third. What people want to do very often, what so often people desperately want to do, is they want to always get this third up at the same time. They think, I can always get my second base up at time X. I very clearly should be able to always get my third up at the same time. But thirds will have wildly different timings. Act fast, you might be able, or you might have to get your third up very, very late. If you see him doing something, going for his third early on, or something as simple as he doesn't have Zergling speed, you can get it very, very early. My favorite example of this is MVP versus Nest-T, where MVP, what does he do? 2 racks bunker, and then 2 factory Blue Flame Hellion into 2 factory tank. So 2 racks Marines into 2 factory Hellions into 2 factory tank. It's really the very standard, very easy shit. Very straightforward. However, he saw Nest-T building roaches and getting 3 bases up himself. Roaches are good at defending. So what did MVP do? He took a third. And then shortly thereafter, he took a fourth. You cannot always take 4 bases early. You cannot always do that. That video is actually free, by the way. GomeTV.net. You can actually check out that game for free. But getting 4 bases is possible in some circumstances. So I went through that whole tirade to point out Dr. Duckload doing something quite smart. We see Catz going for a relatively fast layer. He has relatively late Zergling speed. And hell, if your opponent goes spawning pool and then hatch, but skip this gas geyser, you may very well be able to do this sort of cute 3 zealot kill-off. We now see a Robo, we see +1 on the Forge, we see Chrono Boost there, and we see 4 almost immediate third base from White-rA. Here it comes, Shazoom. We have just hit 9 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. 9 freaking minutes, and already White-rA is taking a what? A third base. That is cool news. That is cool news, Bears. And one of my favorite aspects about when people take early bases, or just expanding and defensive play in general, is that it can be very obvious what you need to do to defend, and all the things that need to be thrown at you to defend. If you're playing a really aggressive opening, it can sometimes be very unclear as to when you need to attack and all that stuff, right? That can sometimes make it very difficult. And by the way, I just think I'm going to take no commercial breaks today because I kind of started late, and you know what, screw it, I'm just in a good mood and I want to keep doing the daily. So what's cool about this style that we're seeing White-rA do is we're going to start seeing some problem solving occur from Dr. White-rA that I think is very awesome, right? So we are now taking 3 bases very early on. What are some things we want to begin early? Well, you know what? Obviously a +1 attack, because I want to get upgrades up early. Anytime I'm doing things that involve the late game, such as, I don't know, expanding once and then expanding twice, this seems pretty late game oriented, then I should do everything else late game oriented. Upgrades are good for later game armies. Building more gateways and trying to get out more units is good for earlier, bigger armies. Blah. Hey, some Zergling run-bys can be scary, or some run-arounds, so let's constrict this. Roaches could possibly be scary, so we're building gateways as walls in the front. We already, we got 4 gateways, we got some unit-producing structures up early, and then we're going to structures up. And hell, we get a Twilight Council. Why does this make sense? Why not, for instance, get a robotics bay? Why not build one of those? That would let us get Colossi. Well, that's not consistent with late game play. Getting this Twilight Council, that will let us get better upgrades. So I'm not necessarily saying never get Robo. That doesn't make any sense at all. But it does make a little bit more sense to get the Twilight Council because it allows us to continue this trend of upgrading and ending up getting eventual tech. I definitely think that you should get Colossus at some point. At some point. And of course, how could I forget? Everyone is typing in chat. We make expand and then defense it. Wise words by White-rA. Look at this complete wall off at the front. 8 gateways. Looking very comfortable in the unit station. 59 workers. 59. You almost never see a Protoss having this many more workers than a Zerg. 2 factors as being part of that. Well, Catz was actually going for really fast mutas. And as we see those hatching right now, he has like a badrillion larvae saved up for it. But even then, it's very unusual to see a Protoss with that many freaking dudes. So now White-rA is going to warp prism. This is not just him saying, derp derp, I make warp prisms because I'm White-rA and that's just what I do, so fuck off, right? White-rA is not a dumb player who's tainted a fan base. White-rA is someone who has played around with a warp prism enough to figure out when it works. Yeah. And this is a great situation to do that. We're obviously having to build a whole bunch of units to be able to defend ourselves. But with this many on defending, why not try to do something a little more, why not try to do something a little bit aggressive at the same time? Well, attacking by the ground doesn't really make a lot of sense. So a warp prism to do some warping in makes a lot more sense to me. We don't actually see it get used that much. Also, the Dark Shrine, I think, is another really good tool to go for very, very quickly. But an interesting fact I want everyone to be aware of, look at the unit counting station. 3 Zealots, those are the 3 Zealots that we made at the start of the game. 2 Sentries, these are 2 Sentries we have since made. And that's it. Yeah, wow, huh. Ain't that some shit, right? Now, a lot of you will go, well, that's bad. He shouldn't do that. That's newbie play. Oh! And they'll start using the voices that I used in The Boy and His Game. The greatest story ever. The Boy and His Game. Look it up. Ding. But in fact, with almost all good Protoss plays, there's a long period where there is no gateway production. I'm going to throw out two examples really fast. In PvZ, OGS MC, when he's getting a ton of air units, he's going Void-rA and Phoenix. He gets 3 gateways early on, but doesn't use them, only in case of emergency. He is saving his money, he's expanding, he's building more gateways, he's getting the Robo, he's getting the Colossus tech up, he's getting the upgrades. He's just not building units quite yet. Protoss units actually build quite quickly, if you think about it. Another good example, in the simplest daily ever, a daily about Hasu Obs, he went for very fast 2-2 upgrade with Blink and Charge. And what ended up happening? Well, he had a few Stalkers poking out, and then he made some more gateways, and waited, and made some more gateways, and waited, and made some more gateways, and then, with having built no units, he suddenly had, like, 13 gateways, and was just able to barrel out gigantic amounts of units really quickly. And this is kind of where White-rA is finding himself right now. If for some reason a bunch of Zerg units ended up sweeping in, White-rA would be able to suddenly warp in 8 units. In addition, he already has some cannons up and some good locations to turtle. And he even has the Observer. So now we see the Mutalisk sweeping in. I honestly think that White-rA may be powered a little too hard. Maybe should have waited on this Warp Prism. The idea, I think, is brilliant. The timing may have been a bit early. I also think that the timing on this Robotics Bay may have been a bit early. I understand the logic of it. You want to begin getting a high Colossus count early. But I think it really kind of needed to wait in this particular circumstance. I do think the early Robo for the Observer was correctly timed, though. So we see White-rA having a little bit of a struggle bear moment. Oh no. Oh no. But this is one of the delightful aspects about having the fastest third base you could ever imagine. Catz does know about it, for the record. You just get units of attacks have some success. If you do something like 3-gate, expand, and then you're trying to secure your third, if you take too big of a loss, you're in Doomtown, USA. It is not going to work out too good for you. But something that I would just like to note as a general observation, to restate, all White-rA really needs to think about is defending at this point. And what if you're White-rA, and let's say you lost this game right now. Let's say you lost this game. It's really clear what adjustment you should make. You didn't have enough Stalkers early on. Maybe you should just get that Twilight Council, get Blink, and then that's fine. Maybe that's fine! You know, maybe that's what you should do. Maybe you just shouldn't be getting this Warp Prism and Immortal and Colossus up. Clear choices that you could make that would be a good adjustment for the next game. However, if you were playing a very fragile style, the solution might be, well, I guess I need to attack here and I need to do damage. And that sometimes can be very hard to discover, but this is why I like defensive plays. And notice how White-rA did some good thinking at the start of the game and got himself into a good defensive mode. And suddenly, White-rA is starting to step forward farther into the game, getting a Warp Prism, because again, the timing may have been off, but the idea is golden. And oh, what do we want to do? Go for late game, continuing to upgrade. Some very smart decisions incoming. Now, I want to come to Camp Catz and check out some of what he's doing. He opened up Mutalisks, he's getting himself 3 bases, he has Spores and Spines, and everything in between. There's also an Infestation Pit here, getting the Pathogen Glands. And to briefly talk about Catz, I will say, this is Protoss Appreciation Day. So that's why we're focusing so much on White-rA, because who doesn't want to focus on White-rA? He's White-rA, what the hell? But to touch on a little bit of what I think is brilliant about Catz's play, the Infestor is one of those units that you're always really trying to get a ton of. And Destiny does this by getting a layer and immediately getting the Infestors. And there's some problems that end up arising with that. But what Catz does is he opens up with the really fast Mutalisks for some good map control. And now he's taking a lot of bases and now transitioning over into the Infestors, and we actually see some gas starting to build up for him in the bank, as well as all the geysers getting placed up. So this, I think, is a cool solution to get to a Zergling Infestor mixture. And again, I do think Duckload could have gotten a little bit more Blink here, and he would have been in a much safer spot. Per usual, at any point in the game, you always want to be asking yourself, how can I put pressure back on my opponent? DT is one of the best things to do. That's why I love the idea of getting a really fast Blink and following it up with some kind of faster Dark Templar we can put on pressure while we have this third up and secured. You heard? Scouting around, poking about. trying to find some sort of little hole in which to poke while the harassment continues. And, I think White-rA's decision-making is pretty forced at this point. There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of times, some of the best builds have long periods where you're like, well, I guess all I'm going to be doing is wandering around a bunch of stalkers and trying not to die, and I'm going to be wandering around some DTs and seeing if I can do anything, but most of all, better chrono boost that upgrade out. And that I think is fine. This one little addition of the Warp Prism, I think is very cool, and some cool things arise out of it. So let me actually go into the White-rA cam, the duck load shot. The duck shot. As he's trying to do a little bit of dropping, oh no, it didn't work out right. I still think that overall this is a really good decision to do these sorts of drops and pokes, because it's kind of like a medevac that you'll see in Zerg vs. Terran. All of everything was over here doing some defensing. And meanwhile, White-rA takes his very mobile, very retreatable army of stalkers up here to try to punish an expansion. And notice how rapidly Duckload was able to, White-rA was able to pull from defensive and defending into this huge attack that ends up just wrecking Zerg's face. And likewise, while we're attacking, we expand, one of the most common laws of just general RTS gaming. But most importantly, we expand to an area that is easy to defend based upon where our attack is going. If this, let's say Catz had this expansion here and White-rA had seen that. If White-rA was selecting these stalkers and sending them here, White-rA should be expanding at the south position. Because White-rA selected these units and attacked up here, he should be expanding to the right position. Too often people will look at this and they'll just say, yeah, you know what, this is the obvious third, this is the fourth, and I will only ever take my fourth here ever, period. You can choose where you want to expand. In fact, for instance, a Zerg might even consider expanding to the bottom left and bottom right corners of the map, and that might be correct. Think very as your replays where your third should be. So we see some nice sniping, a whiff on that fungal growth. But unfortunately for our protoss hero, starting to see complexities. Catz get to that critical number of infestors where all protoss players cry a lot. So now I want to break this into our third phase of learning. Let me actually just pause here to recap. Phase one is to say, looks like the lag is ridiculous. Everyone's lagging, and that's basically fine. I don't think there's anything I can do about that. LOL, no problem. Is it stuttery, or is it just like a year behind? I'm asking Marky. It should be stuttery. If it's a year behind, alright, if it's stuttery, nothing can be done about that. Expect stutteriness. Listen to my reassuring voice, and you know what? I'll even close my eyes and cross my arms and tell you what you should be learning. You guys, and you beautiful archive viewers, whom I love so much. These are the three things that we want to be thinking about. At the start of the game, we thought, how can we get as fast a third as we can? And we thought to ourselves, well, hey, my opponent does not have fast link speed, and therefore cannot really pressure me if I go for it immediately. That's a cool little equivalence we thought of that allows us to take it. If he did have Zergling speed, it is okay to say, well, I want as fast of a third as I can, but I might have to wait 3, maybe 4 minutes. That's fine to do. The second big thing I want you to take away is that with these builds where you get very, very, very fast expansions, a lot of times your questions are all defensive-oriented, and honestly, many defending questions are easy to answer. So get a little bit bolder with how quickly you expand and see if by some miracle you can defend it. White-rA, though he kind of got mauled a little bit hard early on, he was able to bounce back quickly with the 3 bases, and whatever decision he chooses for the next game to adjust, it seems pretty clear. There feels like there are options. The third thing I want to come to is how White-rA is going to end up defending or dealing with this late-game army situation. Many players right now are starting to feel like the ultra-super scary Zerg death ball is too much to handle. Many, many, many people feel that way. that once a Zerg player gets to the Broodlord, Infestor, or even just Zergling Infestor mixture, that it can be a little bit too difficult. White-Ra's going to do a couple of things that I dervy. One thing that I want to just put out there, you don't really spend a lot of minerals in the late game as protoss. The Zealot, one of my favorite units, is not the best thing in the universe. So, interestingly, White-Ra makes only DT Archons. In general, you see High Templar Archons. High Templar Zealot Archons are largely what our Protoss players are going for. It frees up their minerals, but Dr. Duckload just says, well, I mean, if I save 50 gas per Archon by going for DT, then hell, after I build a few Archons, I might be able to squeeze out an extra free Archon. Cool! You're wasting hundreds of minerals, but you know what? This is going to actually end up being a little bit more efficient. And we don't even have a high shrine anywhere. A high shrine. A Templar Archives anywhere. We do not have a Templar Archives anywhere in sight. So this means that we didn't even have to invest in the Templar Archives in the first place. And what about the huge damage dealeriness? Well, Dr. Duckload will be investing in the Colossi to deal that. Now I have a question for you. Why is White-Ra allowed to expand here? Because his main army is moving left. This thing is effectively secured. It's a little bit vulnerable. If we start pushing, that's how we'll actually be able to defend it. But in particular, this expansion at the spring up, because positionally we moved to the left, and that's how we were able to defense it. Also, notice White-Ra has a very low mineral count. We don't really spend a ton of minerals in late game PvZ. So Duckload is expanding in a risky location. It's a little bit risky. It's a little bit risky. And now we see this engagement. And it's going to go pretty damn well for Duckload because this is not a really good army composition for Catz. But again, we are seeing a lot of Stalkers replenishing the army. The minerals and the gas are just staying quite low. And the most important thing is that Dr. Duckload is getting himself more gas. Again, if you do DT Archons, then wait, actually you save a lot more gas. It's 50 gas in Archon. No, it's 125 gas per DT. That's 250 gas and 2 Templars, 300 gas. So yeah, you save 50 gas per Archon by doing DT Archons. But still, gas is the resource that restricts you. Yeah. So there we see that there. Happy time. Shield upgrading. And from this point out, what I just love is that it's a very simple, as many Colossi as we can, getting out as many Archons as we can. And here's some scary time aggression and all that stuff. And by the way, CC6, those will be Archons soonly enough. But the other magical thing that I want to throw out there is that the Protoss is expanding a shit ton. So much. It doesn't actually take that much time to go down here, sweep, kill this, and move away. If you are really having trouble getting your bases up, do this. Build a pylon here, and build cannon here and here, and then build a nexus, and then build a pylon here, and creep out with your cannons. Hell, I mean, a lot of times there will be a Zergling waiting here. There's nothing wrong with actually building a pylon and a cannon, and then a cannon, and then a nexus. That sounds ridiculous, but if you're not going to be spending your minerals anyway, if you're going to be getting a mineral stockpile, then yeah, this is a great way to get the expansions up. And also, at the very, very final thing that I want to note is that still, I think a Warp Prism is a great thing to throw in at this late game stage, because in the late game, if your opponent is going Broodlord Infestor, how the hell can he manage drops? Don't forget about this key upgrade, the Gravitic Drive, that I always called the Gravatic Drive because I'm an idiot. But the Gravitic Drive, it increases the speed of your Warp Prisms. We're strengthening our late game by spending our minerals on these expansions and on the Warp Prisms with minerals that we would not be doing anyways. We are doing minerals to strengthen our late game. And this Archon decision helps with our gas just a teensy-tweensy bit. The Archon is the scariest unit for Zerg to deal with late game. Archons are terrifyingly good. They're ridiculously absurd. I kind of think that at this point, Dr. White-rA really kind of needs to get some High Templar. Kind of needs to get those High Templar because against enough Broodlings and infested Terrans, you really, I think quite honestly, do need Storm. White-rA, look at this. 3 guys mining minerals, 6 guys mining gas. 6 guys mining gas. 2 guys hanging out, 6 guys mining gas. 2 guys in gas! 3 guys in gas. 3 guys in gas. Gas is our most important resource, so how can we solve some problems with some minerals, man? Well, gee, Dr. Duckload doing the smart thing with all that goody goodness jazz. And of course, one of the more important things to do in the game is protoss. Overproduce gateways so that way you can replenish armies at a ridiculous pace. I actually think White-rA should have killed off these destructible rocks. I think this is where he should take his 6th. This ends up being the easiest one because it doesn't have rocks blocking it, but this is the safest one because it's the most tucked away, nestled expansion. It's very easy to defend. You frickin' idiot. Frickin' you. What do we see in the unit counting station? We see Broodlords popping out. We don't actually see any infested Terrans. Or excuse me, infestors. There are 5 now incoming for Dr. Duckload. And he is now continuing to move up. But at this point, this is kind of a straightforward thing. But just look at the ridiculous easily White-rA is being able to replenish these. Again, notice high on minerals, low on gas. How can we use our minerals to do other useful things? Sure, you could make zealots. But I like expanding and cannons more. Because even if you have a base like this that only had 3 minerals mining there, it ends up being good. Now we are going to see some Neural Parasite. This is obviously a side effect of it, but when you start getting this many units that you want to be Neural Parasiting, it's kind of hard. And again, yeah, where is it? Yeah, a robotics or a warp prism. Yeah, all right. And I really think these upgrades also could have been better, though. If I must criticize, which of course I totally must, because my name's Day 9. Placement would prefer this one by an overwhelming amount. And another thing I love about the late game is a lot of it is the units and how much White-rA expand, which is a crap ton for your average protoss. But also it is the fact that White-rA is never trying to hit this base or this base with a direct attack. He's killing off this one and he's killing off this one. There's nothing wrong with playing that starvation style. And in fact, in many circumstances, it's correct. So look, what do you know? We have Neural Parasites successfully planting. We have Broodlords there. The army is small, but this is a crushing win. You can imagine if Catz had a significantly larger army. You can clearly see. Let me speed it up. You can clearly see that these army supplies were not... Oops. They were actually even. There we go. 109 to 102. We have 6 Broodlords. We have 6 Infestors. And a decent amount of Zergling Roach. I will say the Roaches kind of skew this number a lot because Roach Army is not actually very good. But if you imagine Zerg having, I don't know, 30 more supply, it's still going to be really hard. Still going to be very... And it's that in the late game. The mass expanding, plus the Archons, plus how he was timing the attacks with where he expanded behind. It wasn't just do a fast expo or that sort of thing. It was really well thought out, and I really liked that. So you know what? This daily is a teensy bit shorter than normal, but that's okay because we weren't even going to have a daily today because my internet, unfortunately, has been unable to properly stream things. So what I'm going to do is take some questions. Yeah, all right. So maybe when that message actually hits the live viewers who are experiencing some delay, maybe then we can take some questions. Taking questions. Let me just stretch. Let me. Alright, no one's asking any questions yet. Hold on, let me just say I'm reading Dresden Files again. This book is awesome. Oh my god, I love the Dresden Files so much. Oh, I've only read the first 5. Even a chance to read them. That's one of the best part about airplane trips lately is I just get to read through it really awesome. Fear Dragon 64. Obviously a game on the Nintendo 64 because that's what everyone did. They just put 64 at the end. Dear Day 9, White-rA often goes down multiple tech paths faster than any other protoss I see. How does he manage this without seeming to sacrifice economy or losing to early pressure? I would say that he does overdo it a teensy bit, sometimes a little bit too much, but it's not like an accident. It's not like he just kind of wins by mistake, and people could just easily win if they attack him early. He's one of the protosses that really understands how few units you need to have made in order to be able to hold off an attack. Because if you imagine you have 5 gateways and 5 zealots, and all of a sudden you see an attack coming, you can suddenly make 5 sentries, force field, delay, chrono boost all your gateways, get another round of stalkers in, and suddenly you've tripled your army size in less than 30 seconds. Because the initial warp-in takes 0 seconds, and then with Chrono Boost, it's less than 30 seconds to your next warp-in. You can crisis respond very quickly with Protoss. And not a lot of Protosses actually exploit that. They just sort of constantly make units, constantly make units, constantly make units, constantly make units. Damn it, I didn't win. White-rA's going down a million tech paths at once. It gets him in trouble, though. But, I mean, you can imagine if your average Protoss bearer is going down 1 tech path, and White-rA seems to be getting away with 4 tech paths, then you can kind of safely say, maybe somewhere in 2 and 2 to 3 is okay to do. Maybe I should start doing that more often. And you'll find out, wow, if I just build warp gates and then don't use them, I can crisis respond really well, really easily. Shazam. So I would say be almost like White-rA. Yeah. Keeny Wing says, Day 9, why did White-rA get +1 shields after +3 weapons instead of +1 armor? Is it due to fungal growth or for the Archons? It's basically for the Archons. I mean, if you want to have a lot of Archons, you may as well get those upgrades out early. Melted Igloo says, Dear Day 9, what can a Zerg do to kill Archons? Our mass roach is effective. Archons are just really good. So take that, Zerg units. I actually think that probably the best thing, weirdly enough, is a lot of Hydralisks with Broodlords. I mean, there's the obvious things where you're like, derp-de-derp, I guess I'm going to be building Neural Parasite to kill the Archons off. The problem that I feel with a lot of the simple encapsulations of answers is that they ignore all the other interactions going on. Sure, Neural Parasite can kill off an Archon because you take control of it, but what if he has a lot of Archons in Templar? It doesn't work. In small numbers, Neural Parasite works. In big numbers, I feel like Broodlords, with maybe some Roaches, but largely a lot of Hydralisks to deal damage, because the Broodlings are going to be absorbing the damage anyways. And having some fungal growth, I think, is actually quite helpful. But just damage-dealing units are the best way to deal with it. The other more important thing is to do a lot of counterattacking. And a lot of Nidus Warming and a lot of dropping, because the big reason Archons get scary is because you have lots of them. You have so many of them. You need to cut down on Protoss's expansions. The best counter to Archons is to have Protoss not with 8 or more geysers. That's the best response. So that's more the focus. In a direct confrontation, again, Broodlords and I think Hydras are really super ultra good, but it's kind of hard to actually go places with that kind of army. Let me see here. Hey, it eats a lot. It says, Dear Day 9, what are units you should be dropping with as Protoss? Well, it kind of depends on the phase of the game, but again, I think mass Zealot warp-ins. When you have like 13 warp gates, so you just get a warp prism and suddenly army there to kill off the expansion. Why do I love this? Because I'm not really spending a lot of minerals late game as Protoss. I'm mainly spending gas on Stalkers, Templar, DTs, Archons, Colossus, largely gas units. So on all these excess minerals, well, cool, I can just kill off expansions all over the place. Yeah! So that's probably the best one. Warping in DTs are always really useful, but be ninja with them. Get a warp prism, going to warp in 1 DT to go this way, and then 12 zealots to go the other way. Yeah. Buckster McGee, why do you think White-rA is more successful in general? Well, he did win IPL 2 for $15,000, so I'm really happy he actually won a big thing. But I think that really super crisp, observant players realize that he's sometimes trying to get away with a little bit too much, and there's not enough focus on having enough defense there. I think the best example is Select, who said that in NASL, Select was like, you know what, White-rA, he tries to go DT and drop at the same time, so I'm just going to do a timing push and kill him on Xel'Naga Caverns. And that's exactly what happened. So it's that sort of exploit that I think is so good. Let's take the last questions. Refreshing. Pylab says, Dear Day 9, White-rA had 89 probes at the end of the game. Do you think you should have freed up some supply? Sure, I think that's fine. I actually think that's probably going to be something that you're going to want to do as protoss, because again, if I'm not spending that many minerals, then I just don't need that many minerals. Hell, if I had 50 probes with half of them mining gas and half of them mining minerals, seems good to me. Well, actually, so it's 6 guys per geyser per base. So if you have 1, 2, 3, 4 bases, then that's 24 guys mining gas. So you have 89 probes. Then yeah, I guess the number kind of makes sense if you're on 6 bases. But still, there's nothing wrong with doing that. The important thing that I would love everyone to note is that if you have 89 probes, that's only 110 food for your army. And it still smashes people if you have like Archon, DT, High Templar, Colossus as your units with a couple of Stalkers, right? It's just so ridiculously good. So I am gonna wrap up the daily that wasn't gonna happen. We're gonna wrap it up. I'm on vacation, guys. I'm on vacation. I'm just gonna go take breaks. Well, you know, I have to do a lot of work tomorrow, but starting on Saturday or something, I'm gonna go on vacation, and I guess I'm also gonna do some more GeForce recordings with Husky, because that doesn't actually count as work, because he's awesome. And I'm also gonna go now. Bye, guys. Woo!